Welcome to Inherited. I'm your host, Ruby Hall, and every week I sit down with a guest who tells me about the rule, relic, recipe, and ritual that has shaped who they are. Today I speak with Zara Seidler, co-founder of the millennial and Gen Z news company, the Daily Aus. Zara is incredibly driven, smart, and passionate about social justice, a trait she inherited from her late father, who died suddenly when she was just 16 years old. In this conversation, Zara speaks about her experience with grief and loss at such a young age, what it's like to become one of Australia's leading entrepreneurs, and the moment she married her best friend and life partner without her father by her side. Just a note before you listen, this episode does touch on suicide, and help and support is available via Lifeline on 13 11 14. Here's Zara. Well, it's so nice to meet you, Zara.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, thanks for coming in. I've been really looking forward to meeting you. I've followed the Daily Aus for years now.
Thank you.
It's just such an engaging news platform online. It's so easy to see a headline pop up on your Instagram feed with those bright, bold colours, or on TikTok as well.
Yeah, bring people in, make them care about the world around them.
That's it.
Bright colours, distraction, but then you're in.
Yeah.
Then you're reading about the news.
Absolutely. We'll start with your rule today. So what is the rule that you live by?
The rule I live by is not to be reckless in either direction. And I can't take credit for this one. I was told this one by an investor of ours. So
yeah.
The Daily Aus started as a little side hustle. It was selfishly just Sam, my best friend, and I wanting to share the news with the people around us, just our friends.
Yeah.
And we did that for a really long time. No one particularly paid attention. And then, COVID happened and so many huge world events happened that meant that our business grew really, really quickly. Or I shouldn't say business because it was just a side hustle then. And it grew so quickly that we ended up raising a round of capital and going full time. And so that's when I met this investor who gave me this advice.
Right.
And he said, don't be reckless in either direction. And that came off the back of me feeling like I had been told my whole life that women are risk averse and that we don't take risks and, it's just a gendered thing. And I thought that that matched up to my experiences of not wanting to spend a heap of money in the business and not wanting to go really hard on a risky idea. But really, I learned that going really far in either direction, whether that be going hard and taking a huge risk or being too conservative and never putting yourself out there, both of those things can equally damage your prospects, whether that be your business or your personal life.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I think about each and every day because I never want to hold back the business. I never want to go too far. And as a first-time founder, I have no idea how I'm doing. I don't know, what the roadmap looks like. So that really guides me forward.
Absolutely. So you're 27 years
I'm
old,
27,
aren't you?
yeah.
That is incredible for you to have created this business. With this mantra, why did it stick with you so much at the time?
I think because it was really validating for me. I think that I was such a foreigner to business.
Yes.
I had a kind of background caring about politics and caring about the news. I'd certainly never been in business, let alone run one.
Yeah.
And so to have someone with so much experience come in and say, you're doing okay, and here are some guardrails that you can put that might set you off in the right direction, but then it's yours to take.
Yeah.
And that risk thing always played on my mind.
Of course.
Looking back, it's all bullshit. Like I took a huge risk in quitting my full-time job to launch a company, and I have to tell myself that each and every day. Whenever I say no to something, I'm like, no, that's not risk averse. I'm just being pragmatic.
Yeah.
And so it's just redefined the way I think about things.
Absolutely. Tell me about the moment you decided to launch the Daily Aus. So this started off as a side hustle.
It did.
And then when did you decide to go, we're all in, let's really make something of it?
Well, to the point of being risk averse, I would have never gone all in if we didn't have the kind of financial stability to do so. And I think that's really important. I think that so often we hear this idea of bootstrapping and, you just put all your savings towards the business and you hope it works. Like, I was absolutely not about that. So we worked and chipped away at it for so many years without ever thinking it would become a business. We thought it would always just be something that would happen on the side. I loved politics.
Yes.
I was always really attracted to it. Sam was a lawyer and he was moving up the ranks in corporate law. And so it kind of happened by accident. We did it every single day. So we uploaded the news just for our friends on Instagram where they were each and every day before and after work. And I think the consistency meant that when COVID happened, we already had quite a small but loyal base who had come to us each and every day for information. And I always say it's a privilege not to care about the news. I think that if you don't care or you can choose not to care about the news, it means that government welfare payments, for example, don't affect you and you don't need to find out whether or not they've gone up or down. And so suddenly we were faced by COVID where everyone had to care about the news. It didn't matter if you were rich, poor, where you lived, what you did, you had to care. And so that was a huge turning point for our business. And it meant that we had grown an audience and a loyal audience enough that we were able to say, okay, we can probably do this. And so we both quit our jobs on the same day. We raised the money to be able to pay ourselves a very small salary to just ensure that we could get by. And we did it. We took the leap. And then on the first day we sat in a cafe and we were like, well, now what do we do? We don't know how to run a business. We know how to do the news. How do we make money? And so it was a very steep learning curve.
I love that though. And good on you for doing that. Why is it important for platforms like TDA to exist?
Oh, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that. I have lots of thoughts, but I think there are lots of misconceptions about young people. And I think first and foremost, it's that young people don't really give a shit about the world around them. I think that is fundamentally untrue. I think what we've been able to do is prove that. I think what we've seen is that traditional legacy media doesn't really cater to young people. It doesn't match their consumption habits. It doesn't speak their language. There's so much assumed knowledge. And so we really tried to take that knowledge that we know young people want to be reading the news. They want to be engaging in these discussions, but they aren't. So what's missing? And we just tried to fill that missing gap, and we were able to do that. And I think that having an informed, participating democracy is so important, and I hope that we're a really small part of that.
Absolutely. Was it always a dream of yours to co-found a news platform?
Absolutely not. Like without a shadow of doubt, no. There was just, in Australia, the people who founded a news platform were Rupert Murdoch. And that's kind of it. That's the blueprint. When we broaden it to look at media more generally, there are lots more examples. We have so many amazing founders in the media space, but specifically in news, it's been really hard to cut through. And so there was kind of nothing that I saw out there that was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I was just so motivated by knowing that we could hopefully help the people around us and then being able to grow a business around that and, to pay staff and build a team. That was just such an unexpected bonus.
Absolutely. So you said you worked 7 days a week. How did you find that?
I mean, I think that when I reflect on, I've had a short career. I think I need to say that from the outset. I'm still young, and when I talk back to all of these jobs I did them for short periods of time. So we're not talking about a 30-year, long career of doing all of these things. But I really wanted to dip my toe into all the different parts of, I guess, power that existed in Australia. So I was really interested in politics. I was really interested in journalism. I was really interested in lobbying, all of these things that kind of interrogate power but from different perspectives. And so I was like, well, I'll just do them all at once. And so that's what I did. And I worked really hard, but I was so young. I was so hungry. And I was learning so rapidly that I kind of loved it. It was stressful, but I loved it.
So when you made the decision just to be a business owner now with the Daily Aus, what was that change like for you?
I mean, running a business is extremely difficult. You never get to switch off, which I'm sure you're going to hear from a lot of people. You never get to switch off, and it's a different way of not being able to switch off. It's kind of the emotional responsibility more than anything. And so I think that transitioning, I was so excited by the prospects of what TDA could be. I was so excited by what impact we could have on Australia and on young people's understanding of the world. And so that propelled the first couple of years. And then one day recently we looked around and we were like, wow, we started this up. We talk about startups and like we have that. We have built that. We've built the infrastructure. And so now we're kind of in that transition phase of how do we maintain this? How do we create this really professional environment that's here to stay and is sustainable in an Australian media market that is dominated by very few players?
Oh, good on you guys. I was saying before at the start, before we got into your rule, how much I love going on the Daily Aus Instagram and TikTok as well. And you've got your podcast.
We do.
Yeah.
Every single day of the week for a very long time. Sometimes we regret doing it the Daily Aus. We're like, oh, couldn't have been the weekly Aus,
Maybe the fortnightly Aus.
Maybe the monthly Aus.
Yeah. Well, you're very driven, obviously. And, I mean, it's paid off. So well done to you. It's a testament to you. What do you think has been the biggest risk you've taken in your career?
I mean, definitely doing this.
Yeah.
Quitting my job that could have set me up on a really clear trajectory.
Yeah.
Doing something that at times can be really unpopular. I think that we have, as a society, created a situation where people expect for news to be only opinion or for news to be activism. And I think that it's been really difficult along the way to always just do what we do, which is free of opinion, free of jargon, free of bias. And so that's been difficult, but it's been the best risk and, the most rewarding risk that I've ever taken. And I know that I'm only at the beginning now, so I can't wait to see, what happens in the years to come.
It's so exciting. Does this rule, don't be reckless in either direction, apply to other areas in your life too?
Definitely. So I think that tied into, I'm going to call it pragmatism, not being risk averse, because I'm trying to redefine it in my own brain.
No,
but
I love it.
I think that tied to that and based on several experiences in my life that I think we'll get into a bit later, I think that I can naturally be quite a pessimistic person. I think that at times I can expect the worst just because at times that's what's happened.
Yeah.
And so I'm really trying to use the thinking of not being reckless in either direction to also mean don't be recklessly pessimistic about anything, whether that be, relationships or friendships. I just think it can be applied in so many different facets of my life. And I really, really want to maintain that as something that's core to who I am.
I love that. You also told us, for me, it means not staying entrenched in my own beliefs, but being open to negotiating a healthy middle. Can you speak to this?
Yeah. So something that Sam, my business partner, and I do often is we are very different people. Anyone that knows us, we are very different people. He is so optimistic and so excitable about everything in the world. And I am quite pragmatic, as we've said, and will take a bit more time to come around to something.
Yeah.
And so often we will come into a meeting room and we'll be discussing something about work and he'll say his point of view, I say my point of view, and then I'll say, all right, contest of ideas. And that's just about we will, labor our point and we will have the contest of ideas and then we will meet somewhere in the middle. And that term contest of ideas has been so healthy for us. Otherwise, whoever's louder just wins, and I don't want it to be that if I come in guns blazing with my idea, that should automatically be better than his or vice versa. And so having a way to negotiate, which feels like a formal word, but having a way to just discuss and really go back and forth on things. For us, contest of ideas means put everything on the table, no disrespect at all, and let's just get to a healthy middle.
And obviously it's worked between the two of you. I think it's sometimes good, and this can be the same within maybe relationships as well. If there is someone that is a little bit more pragmatic and then there's someone that is a little bit more risky, you can learn a lot from each other. And you guys probably have as co-founders.
Definitely. And, I've spoken to Mission Zara about this, that's what makes a partnership really sing is when you don't just have duplicates of the same skill sets and personality types. Right. You want people to be able to complement each other and to work well with one another. And that means, it's like the idea of don't date yourself. For a long time, I had to get my head around that no, I actually just don't want to date a version of myself because A, deeply egotistical, B, annoying, right? You're constantly coming up against the same things that you believe and it's just reaffirming your own worldview. And so I just think it's important to broaden that and broaden who you are with and engaging with. And that's what I've been able to do here.
Absolutely. It's always good to challenge ourselves, even though it can be hard sometimes.
Definitely.
It can be hard to be self-aware.
Agreed.
We'll get onto your relic next, Zara. A relic could be an object that holds sentimental value to you in some way. What's your relic?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we're doing a video for this because we can. So my relic is a bracelet with my dad's name, Raymond, on it. And I have worn this every single day since he died. So that is 11 years that I have worn this bracelet every single day. And the one day that I took it off was my wedding day. And I was like, oh my God, is it going to be bad juju? What's going to happen? And so I ended up getting it sewn into my dress. So I had it on me on my wedding day. So my dad passed when I was 16 and I wanted to have a part of him, but I didn't really know what. I'm not a very materialistic person in that I don't tend to associate, things with memories.
Yeah.
I actually never even saw him wear this, which is the wild part. And the even wilder part is that on the other side, it says Love Sue. My mother's name is not Sue. No one knows who Sue is.
No way.
And I just wear this every single day, but we don't know who Sue is. Anyway, that could be a podcast and a good little deep dive into it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Beautiful.
This relic on me every single day.
So you began wearing this. How old were you when you found it?
I think that I found it straight after he died when we were going through his things. Yeah. So I would have been 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable, could you share what you remember from around this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I like the way you framed that, if I, can remember, because I actually think that I don't remember a lot. I think that the brain does amazing things to protect you, and it just kind of, when I think of that time, there's a lot of fuzziness in it of not actually, I think it's a bit of suppression. But my dad had suffered from depression for, his whole life since he was 18. He never shared that with us, his kids. My mum knew, but no one else knew. He was a GP. And at that time, you couldn't be a practicing doctor if you had a really severe clinical diagnosis. And so he really kept it to himself. Episodically, as I ended up finding out, he would run away, and that would just be the way that he dealt with his kind of depressive episodes.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was, 10, 15, and we were just being told he was in a conference.
Yeah.
And then when I was 15, I believe, we went overseas to New York together, my mum, my dad, and I, and he started experiencing one of these depressive episodes. And that was the first time that I was told that, this was something that had happened since he was 18, and it was something that he dealt with. He was medicated. But unfortunately, that didn't ever lift, and he wasn't able to come out the other side of it. And when I was 16 and at school, I found out that he had taken his own life, and it really rocked me to my core and will forever define a huge part of who I am. And I got married recently and have written quite a bit about what it's like to do that when there's such a big part of you missing.
Yeah.
But I'm really also proud of where I'm at now and where my family's at now after, dealing with such trauma like that. But it was a really, really challenging time in my life that I think has really changed my worldview forever.
Absolutely. What else was going on for you at the time when you were 16?
I mean, I thought that exams and school were the most important thing in the whole world. I came from an extremely academic family. I remember a teacher once saying, so you'll get 100 in your final exams like all your brothers, right? And I was like, will I? I don't know. And so it was that expectation that had always kind of been placed on me, not by anyone in the family, but by people that knew us.
Yeah.
So academics were so important for me. And so at that time, I guess all I cared about was doing my finals, my HSC exams, hanging out with friends, meeting boys, the usual.
The usual teenage stuff.
Exactly. But then I think, I grew up pretty quickly, and I think that I mourn a bit of the childhood that I think I lost. I didn't get the opportunity to be immature, basically. I just had to be there and be there for everyone in the family. And I, we joke now that I am an 80-year-old in the body of a 27-year-old because get me into bed by 9 p.m. That is my ideal.
Me too.
But I think that, sometimes it would have been good to have a bit more of that joyful youthfulness at some point.
Absolutely. Do you have one sibling?
I have 3.
You have 3?
I have 3 brothers,
So
and I'm the youngest girl.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
Wow. So you grew up quite quickly supporting your siblings too and your mother.
Yeah, I mean, I think being the only girl was a unique position to be in.
Yeah.
My brothers are my best friends. They are the biggest legends on this earth. And thank God we had each other because, to go through pain and trauma like that without a big family unit, I cannot imagine how difficult that would be.
Yeah.
But I was so supported by them and they were quite a bit older than me. So we were able to just be there for one another. But yeah, I think because I was the only girl and I was the youngest, Mum and I had quite a unique relationship.
Yeah.
Still do. She's my best friend and it just meant being there for everyone in whatever way we could.
Absolutely. How did your relationship with your dad differ from that of your mum's?
Oh, so my mum, we always lived in a bit of a matriarchy.
Yes.
It starts with my grandmother, who is the strongest woman I've ever met.
Yeah.
And it comes down to my mum, who is equally the strongest woman I've ever met. And it always meant that when we were kids and all of my friends would have to ask their dads if they could do something, I had to ask my mum.
Yeah.
And it was always the way. It was like mum was the scary one and dad was the one who was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And so with mum, I think that I learnt such strength. And also I think, she was such an excellent role model of what a strong woman and what a determined woman and what a resilient woman looks like. She raised us all. She was so intelligent and so driven and so warm all at once. And I think that compassionate kind of leadership is really special. My dad, on the other hand, he was a doctor. He dedicated so much of himself to his patients. So he worked in a part of Sydney that was quite filled with drug culture and he was an addiction specialist. So he really worked with kind of the most vulnerable of our society and tried to help them out of that. He was really instrumental in setting up safe injecting rooms and he was really instrumental in trying to minimize the harm that these people were facing, but also understanding the full picture. And so I think from him, I got so much of that social justice and that real kind of desire to help people and to not cast aspersions. But it meant that when he came home after a day of that, he was like, yep, kids, whatever you want. Don't mind. Do it. Ask your mother. And so I think very different relationships, but together I had the best childhood and they created such a beautiful home for us.
So you said you got your social justice, personality and grit from your dad. In what other ways has he shaped who you are today?
I mean, I think that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
I think also just compassion.
Yeah.
I think that he had so much, it was like boundless compassion for everyone. In a very real sense, hairy, got that from him. Thank you so much. Works on a guy, doesn't work on me. That is like the Seidler family is known as, anyway. And I think the hairy and the compassion and the social justice all together paint a very accurate picture of who he was.
He'd be so proud of you today, Zara.
Thank you.
Grief is so different for everyone. How do you navigate life processing a loss like this?
I think that the way I have navigated it, and I don't know if it's healthy per se, is through a lot of suppression. I think that I haven't really granted myself the space to reflect often.
Yeah.
And I think that that's worked for me, to be honest. I think that I have allowed myself to keep going when it mattered. Sometimes I think that memories are so painful that they don't necessarily need to always come up. My brother, who is a psychologist, would deeply disagree with me on this, but that's okay. We can have a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
It's worked for me.
Yeah.
And then I have chosen very consciously when I feel like I'm ready to kind of open that Pandora's box. And so I said before my wedding, like that was an opportunity for me to just say, this is a big milestone for me and I need to give myself the space to reflect on how tragic it can be at the same time as how joyful it can be. And so I think that grief has had many different iterations for me, but currently it sits beside me.
Yeah.
It sits beside me every single day. I have written before that it stays the same size and I grow bigger. and that I hope that that is, something that anyone that's at the beginning of their grief journey can know, that it will never go away, but the things that you fill your life with begin to grow around it. And I think that it's that keeps me going and keeps me motivated and allows me when, life can feel too much to just remember that it's a part of me and it's never going away. But it can also be a really beautiful thing. It's also the memories of him that sit beside me.
Absolutely. Wow, that's such a beautiful sentiment. How do you celebrate the life of your dad with your mum and your family?
Yeah, so he died on July 25th, and every July 25th we go out for dinner together and we just talk about him. We talk about how ridiculous he was at times. His favourite thing was to buy like small electronic things that no one needed, like really useless. So he would buy my mum for Valentine's Day like this tiny utensil that she never wanted. She was like, thank you for this very romantic thing. But we try to indulge those sorts of things and really just not make it a sad day. It's about, reflecting on the good times as much as the sad times. And I think that we have really consciously as a family decided that his last chapter shouldn't define the way that we think or talk about him. And that he had nearly 60 years of life before that is worth celebrating each and every day. And so that's what we really try to lean into when we are all together, which is very often, but especially on those days. That's really how we commemorate and memorialise him, which is the best way we know how, through celebration.
Absolutely. And your relic, so it's your dad's bracelet you're wearing today. Is there anything else you and your family have inherited from him?
Oh, I think that I was going to say being deeply talkative, but that feels annoying.
Not at all. That's a great thing.
It's good for this podcast. So much. I look around at my brothers especially, and they are so much of him, whether that be physically or their personalities or what they've dedicated their lives to. I referred earlier to my brother who's a psychologist. His whole life's work now is to better the mental health outcomes for men.
Yeah.
He does heaps of suicide prevention work and he has a PhD in it, and he is out there ensuring every single day that no other family has to deal with what we dealt with. And I just think that dad would be so bloody proud to know that that's how he was being honoured through helping other people, which is what he did each and every day. And, my other brother, my eldest brother, recently wrote a book about our family, and it was at the beginning a bit difficult for me because I hadn't, ever really spoken about it, but here it was on page, written out. But in the end, it helped so many of my mum's friends, even just with the language, to be able to talk to her for the first time about what had happened, because she was of a generation that was so taboo to talk about mental ill health. And suddenly it was on there, on the page for them to refer to and to have language. And so I'm really proud of what everyone's been able to do with what Dad gave them, and to make it something, really, really meaningful.
How do you think we're going, I suppose, in Australia, say, when it comes to talking about mental ill health, whether that's in the workplace or with our mates and family? Yeah. Where do you think we're at?
I think that if I just, reflect on 10 years ago, so much has changed.
Yeah.
Obviously we have so much to go.
Yeah.
Every time you think of the stats, they're extremely sobering. And we know disproportionately that it's men who are attempting to take their lives. And so I know that the work my brother is doing and the work that people in those fields are doing to bring down those statistics mean that, we will get there hopefully one day. But even just having this conversation
right now,
10 years ago, I would have never had this conversation.
No.
And it would have felt uncomfortable and taboo. And, even when my dad died, we didn't tell anyone how he had died for a really long time, like years. I think that there was an element of self-protection in that. And now, if it can help people, it should.
Definitely. So back to your relic, you mentioned before that you sewed this onto your wedding dress so you could still have it with you on the day. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, so I was not someone that had necessarily dreamed of a white wedding. And then suddenly I found myself at a dress fitting in Brisbane. Don't ask how. It was, I'm from Sydney. It was in Brisbane. Yeah. Not quite sure how I found myself in that situation. And suddenly I was really leaning into this kind of wedding culture. And so because I was able to work with someone to create the dress, I really used that opportunity to make it my own.
So cool.
And like you can see, it's not the prettiest piece of jewellery. And so I knew that wearing it on the day perhaps wasn't going to be an option. But I really wanted it close to me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to feel like he was there with me on the day. And so we created this little pocket on the inside. It was quite a big dress. And so in the inner lining, there was a pocket and it went in there. And I walked down the aisle wearing it and I could feel it and I could feel a bit of the jangle. You know, in Jewish tradition, you stand under what's called a chuppah, which is kind of the arch that you get married under.
Yeah.
And I could continue to just feel it during that time, which is when you're surrounded by your family and you're committing to the person you love.
Yeah.
And I just knew that he was there with me, whether it was through that or through something else.
That's so beautiful.
But it brought me a lot of comfort. And wearing this every day, you know, I don't even remember that I'm wearing it.
No.
Like I've got 2 tattoos for him as well.
Yeah.
I think altogether it just makes me feel calmer. I think that I have things that remind me of him to always just look down at or always just look at and know that he's there with me.
Oh, it's so special. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inherited. As someone from Perth, I've truly fallen in love with Melbourne since moving here, and I'm doing my best to discover every bit of the city. Melbourne is an amazing place to live and visit because there's so many incredible events, such as netball's Constellation Cup and Tasman Cup decider tomorrow night, which I'm super excited to be attending. Growing up like so many Aussies, I played netball in high school, and it's great to see the sport thriving on a big stage here in Melbourne too. So in true Inherited form, I'm getting deep with the sport by asking Kelpies player Josh Byron what his Melbourne ritual is. Here's Josh.
My favourite Melbourne ritual is my weekly trip to Param Market. Each Sunday, my partner and I sit down with a coffee and a borek together before we do our weekly shop. We love wandering the market, taking our time, exploring the different stalls and supporting family-owned businesses that supply such incredible produce. So whether you're after fresh ingredients for the perfect sandwich or a great way to start the day on the south side, Param Markets is a must-try.
Rally behind our Australian Diamonds and Kelpies tomorrow night as they bring their Constellation Cup and Tasman Cup campaigns against New Zealand to a close. Both series will finish in Melbourne at John Cain Arena on Wednesday, 30th of October. Tickets are still available via Ticketek too. In what other ways did you honour him on your wedding day?
So I think that the biggest thing was that I made space for my grief with him. And I know that's a kind of weird answer, but I think that I was really worried about having to paint a picture of being really happy if I wasn't feeling that way. And so I started my wedding morning by going to the cemetery and I, had a bit of a cry, was a bit angry, then was a bit sad again.
Yeah.
And then I really felt like I could just close that door to those emotions and then open another door to joy. To me, that was the greatest way to honour him. It was that he didn't bring down my day in any way. There was nothing that I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger by the time I got there. I just felt complete and utter joy. And I think that was the way to honour him, was to know that I could build this really beautiful narrative that included him in my day. And it was the best day of my life by an absolute mile. And, people say that all the time, but I didn't think it was true and then did it and can assure you it is true.
Oh, I saw photos and you just look so elated.
I was so happy.
The most beautiful bride. I haven't seen a smile that big. It was beautiful,
Yeah,
Zara.
everyone came up to me and, normally they'd say, oh, this was beautiful, this was beautiful. They were like, you can't stop smiling. And I was like, I'm genuinely that happy.
That's gorgeous.
I'm surrounded by a room full of people who I love and who love us, and I'm marrying the best person ever. And I have a feeling of fullness. And I think that feeling of fullness hadn't necessarily been there for a very long time.
Oh, who walked you down the aisle? Was it your mother?
It was my mum.
Yeah.
So I did, I had all of my bridal party walk down first, and then I had my grandparents walk down in front of me because they are my favourite people ever. So they are in their early 90s and they walked down the aisle first, and then I came out with mum, who was trying her very best to keep it together and failing miserably. And, there's a photo of me kind of throwing my bouquet up in the air because I was just so excited. I was like, I love this song. I love everyone here.
Yes.
Got down the aisle and saw Ollie, and kind of the rest just took care of itself.
Oh, that's incredible. What do you think your dad would say to the life you've built with the Daily Aus and your partner now as well after being married?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, because I feel like at the age of 16, you don't really know who you are.
No.
It's such an unknown time. You're figuring out so much about yourself. I think there were kind of inklings that this would be where I would end up. You know, I was always so curious, and he really indulged that, and his love of news is my love of news.
Yeah.
But I don't think he could have ever guessed how far that would extend. And so I think he'd be really, really proud of what TDA is doing. And I think that he would know that he had been responsible for sowing the seeds of that in my youth, and, you know, that at our dinner time conversations, we spoke about social justice. That was something that was so prevalent in my childhood, and he really modeled that. And so I think he'd be really proud. And then with Ollie, you know, I spoke earlier about how Sam is the opposite to me. So is Ollie. And so I think that he would just be over the moon, because Ollie is so warm and caring and loving and intelligent. And I just think now all three of my siblings have met their forever partners, and my mum has repartnered, and we're all just good. And I think that he would be so happy to know that we're doing well. And it took a decade to get there, but we're all okay. And I think he'd be really proud of us for getting there.
Oh, you should be so proud of yourself, Zara.
Thank you.
We'll chat about your recipe next.
Oh, God.
What is your recipe?
Okay. So when I told people about this, that I had to come with a recipe, they were like, well, what are you going to do? You don't cook. And everyone in my life knows that. It is like a defining feature of who I am, is that I don't cook and I eat really weird foods.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same, to be honest. I'm not a huge
you?
cook.
Okay, good.
And like maybe some weird sporadic times.
I was like, I don't think I've ever read a recipe in my whole life. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. So I didn't bring a recipe as much as I brought a dish, because like food, same thing.
Yes.
And that is, and anyone that knows me is going to die because it couldn't be any other answer, is schnitzel.
Yeah.
I eat schnitzel every single day of my life.
Yes.
My body probably hates me for it. However, it is, and I can retrospectively assign meaning to it when in actuality I think I just like the taste of it.
Yeah.
Which is that my grandmother, Oma, is Austrian.
Yes.
And she escaped from Austria. She fled to Hungary, and then during the Holocaust lost everything in her whole life. Her family, anything that she physically owned, everything was lost. She came to Australia. Wow. She rebuilt from nothing, and she started this life with my oppa. And she now is the great-grandmother of 2 great-granddaughters, and has a huge family that's flourishing.
Yeah.
And so I picked schnitzel because it's Austrian.
Yes.
It is where she is from originally. Yeah. And, you know, she came, as I said, with nothing, but she had that with her. She had what her childhood could have been and what her life could have been had the Holocaust not happened, and she was able to bring that in to the way that we were raised. And every Friday night when we had Shabbat dinner at her house, it was always schnitzel.
Yeah.
And she was cooking for us well into her 90s.
Whoa.
And I just think food isn't a huge thing for me in any way, but what it means is so important, and what she has been able to pass down through us. My love of schnitzel is one of those things.
What's happening when your grandmother is cooking the schnitzel on those Friday nights? What's happening in the family around the dining table?
Chaos, always chaos. So every Friday night in Jewish tradition, you have Shabbat dinner. So people often complain about having to see their whole families on Christmas once a year. And I say, try doing it every single Friday night.
Yes.
Rain, hail or shine. So it's always, you know, my cousins, my brothers, everyone, aunties and uncles, and we get together. My grandparents live in this beautiful, really old home. Yeah. And so you're sitting they have a sitting room, and we're sitting there, and Anna's, running to and fro. And it's such a comforting memory for me, because that's home for us. Yeah. And it's something that's so constant. It's every Friday. Yeah. And now, my mum hosts, my auntie hosts. It's generational, and it's something that no matter what is happening in the world, we will be able to take forward for our kids as well.
Absolutely. So she's continued to tie you to her former life through food and this recipe. Why do you think that is?
I think that when you flee with, only the things that are in a backpack on your back, you don't have anything else. You don't have anything tangible. I never got to meet her family. She came at the age of 18 to Australia. She knew nobody. She had nothing. She had lost everything. And yet I think this is the thing that gets to tie her to that life and then gets to tie us to that as well. And I just think tangible things were just going to be off the table. And so something that she could keep as a tradition was always going to be the way that, we all remained connected.
What kind of day is it for you when you're eating a schnitzel?
Oh my God. A Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday or Friday? No, legitimately every day. It's concerning for my health, but
No, it sounds delicious. I went the other night at the pub and it was so good.
I know, it's so good. But no, I think, look, like if I am to go to the heart of the tradition, like a Viennese schnitzel is different to a chicken schnitzel. It's different to a Parmigiana. It's we actually, if I'm thinking about a time where I probably had my best one, we went with my grandparents on, I'll call it a roots tour to Europe when I was younger. And that was for them to take us through where they grew up and where they were kept in, camps and where they were kept in ghettos. And they were able to really show us the early parts of their life that, we could only dream of. We had no concept of their life before the war.
No.
They very rarely spoke about it. I think to go to that suppression idea, it was let's keep it below ground so that, we can just keep going because what they saw and what they endured was just so horrific. And yet, at the end of the day, we'd go and have a schnitzel. And it was the end of a really sobering day. It was so hard, but I just remember being in their homeland where so much had happened and the fact that they had survived and they had not just survived, but they had thrived. I think it's a really special thing, and they are just the ultimate kind of testament to what survival looks like, which is they are not spiteful, they are not vengeful. Like they see every day as another opportunity to do good in the world. And my grandma, when my dad died, said to me, tomorrow another blue sky will come, and with that comes something else. And that is something I think about often, that if even she can be optimistic about what's to come, then, everyone can be.
How has she and your wider family supported you through your loss?
She was amazing. She was amazing because she's so stoic that I sometimes wondered what was going on beneath it. We only got this real stoicism growing up that was like, pull your boots up, you're okay, you're fine. And then when Dad passed, I think was the first time that I saw how much pain she had. Like she loved him and so did my grandpa. And so I think that she allowed herself to feel that loss really deeply, and that meant that she could be there for us as well. As someone who had endured so much loss herself, I really felt like I could lean on her. We go for coffee once a week, always, and we just talk and chat and gossip, and it just meant that in those times I could talk to her as someone that knew what loss felt like. Whereas the rest of us were going through it kind of in real time and had no retrospect or no knowledge. So she was, they were both beautiful.
Do you feel like she was sort of a figure in your life that you really were connected to going through your grief from a young age?
Definitely. Definitely. And I mean, I can't even imagine the scale that the loss that she has endured. And if you meet her, you would have no idea that anything bad had ever happened because, anytime she's in hospital or anytime she's at a grocery store or wherever it is, she makes 10 new best friends. Like at Christmas, she gets Christmas presents for the grocery store staff. That is the kind of relationship builder she is.
Beautiful.
And, beneath it all, I'm sure is so much pain, but she has dealt with it so elegantly. And I think that's something that I really can learn a lot from.
And she's one of your best friends.
She's the best. Like the boy drama answers that she has at 94 is top notch.
Oh, they're amazing.
They are.
Well, we'll chat about your ritual next. We'll finish on your ritual. A ritual could be a certain practice or a routine you've brought into your everyday life, and yours is adding to a private Instagram page with your partner.
Yes, I know that this sounds a bit funny. So this one started on the day that Ollie proposed to me, and I was so shocked when he proposed to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm a control freak. I must know everything.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. Turns out he'd been planning it for 8 months, picking up on early conversation, had asked both my mum and my grandmother if he could marry me.
Oh.
He took my grandmother to McDonald's because that's their favourite place, and they sat over fries and burgers, and she said, well, you're either breaking up with her or you're asking to marry her. So which one is it? And he was like, marry, please. So on the day that he decided he was going to propose to me, he created an Instagram page. And I only found this all out later, of course, but he recorded a video. It was during COVID. I had moved out because it was the federal election and I didn't want him to get me sick because he had COVID. And so I was living at my mum's at the time. He was at our apartment. And he filmed himself just sitting at our dining room table, looking down the barrel of the camera and saying, Zara, it's just hit me. Like I need to marry you. I need to spend the rest of my life with you. You're the person. I know. He's such romantic. And after that, over the course of the 8 months that he was building up to proposing, he just started to populate this Instagram page with different photos and memories and videos of our life together. And then on the day that he proposed, he showed it to me, and I suddenly had this like really visual photo album of what our life is like from his perspective. So he added, little comments about what something had meant to him, or that I hadn't suspected this, or whatever it was. Yeah. And it was like the most beautiful thing ever. I mean, there I was, having been proposed to, shocked out of my brain. And then I had this gorgeous thing to also look back at and reflect on. And we just sat there for hours and went through everything. And now we just add to it sporadically to have something that we can remember about all the beautiful memories we're creating with one another.
Oh, it's like a time capsule that
you
got together.
It is. And I think so much of what I do in life, I plan very meticulously. And this was just out of my hand. I couldn't catastrophize. There was nothing. It was just he was doing this really meaningful, beautiful thing, and I just had no idea. And it's I adore it. It's something to and that video of him, I can just look back at that and look at someone who's just declaring his love to nobody but me. And I just think that's a really I'm really privileged to have that. I think
that's so gorgeous. So were you quite shocked when he proposed to you in the moment?
Yes. Okay. So I've been dropping hints.
Yeah.
As
you
we
have
do.
discussions.
Yeah. It'd been 6 years,
Yeah.
But he had kind of said nah, whatever.
Yeah.
Had taken a photo of the girl next to me at Pilates who was wearing a beautiful engagement ring, had sent him that, being like, by the way, if it's happening.
Stunning.
Anyway, I got it. So that was a good outcome for me.
It is gorgeous. I've noticed it against your beautiful dress.
The girl next to me at Pilates, thanks for that. But we were going away for my birthday that weekend, and I was really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
The night before we were meant to be going, it had dawned on me. I was like, oh, maybe he'll propose while we're there.
Yeah.
And it was the first time, for some reason, it had just clicked with me. I was like, oh, it might happen while we're there. And then I was like, oh, God, I have no clothes. I have nothing. Anyway, there was a full day until we were going.
Yes.
So I went to work, had a normal day at work.
Yep.
Got home, was like, cool, got to start packing. Got home, he was there on one knee. And I was like,
really
what?
Took you by surprise.
It was just, I think, I had thought it could be coming.
Yeah.
But I had legitimately no idea that it would happen then. And on the front door of our apartment, he had 2 pieces of paper that said good news, bad news. So the bad news said, we're not going to the Whit Sundays. And I was like, this is the worst bad news ever.
This sucks.
I really need a break.
Yeah.
And the good news just said, come inside. And there he was with all the beautiful decorations. And he had to come up with this elaborate ruse of a holiday because he knew I wouldn't take time off work otherwise.
Yeah.
And so he had organised an engagement party with all of our friends from Sydney and Melbourne. And that weekend we celebrated our love, and he had organised every single detail, and it was unbelievable.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. To what you were saying earlier before about being a bit of a control freak and a meticulous planner, I completely relate with you there. And then to be completely knocked back like that, but he planned everything.
Everything.
So in such detail. Yeah.
And I mean, it's something, I tend to stay away from wanting to host events. I don't know why. It just like makes me a bit stressy.
I'm the same.
I'm like, I like going to other people's.
Me too. And then I'm like, I'll go now.
Yeah, exactly. Goodbye. And then suddenly I was like, well, I don't have an option.
Yeah.
There are 150 people coming to our house. Okay.
And to be thrust in that maybe is good sometimes.
I know.
It's not making a decision.
Yeah, and it was so much fun. Like our friends still talk about it. We were kind of one of the earlier ones to get engaged.
Yeah.
So there was so much excitement. It was honestly the best. So yeah 10 out of 10 for Ollie.
When did you first meet Ollie?
So Ollie slid into my DMs. We had a few mutual friends.
Yeah.
We had grown up in similar communities in Melbourne and Sydney, but we had never met. And he slid into my DMs and said something to the effect of like, hey, is the Daily Aus you? Like, it's great, haha, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, who are you? What? Anyway, we started speaking on Instagram. That conversation happened quite organically.
Yeah.
Then we just kept talking. And so we spoke for 4 months over the phone.
Yeah.
Then he came to Sydney for a work trip and we met up and we've been dating ever since the first day that we met.
Right. Did he then move to Sydney as well? Or did you do long distance?
We did long distance for 3 years. Yeah, we spent a lot of time apart. A lot. I was working on a political campaign. I couldn't leave.
Yeah.
He had so much going on in Melbourne. It worked for a time until it just didn't. We wanted more.
Of course.
And then he moved to Sydney for work, as he says. It was hopefully for more than just work. He quit the job shortly after. And he's been living in Sydney ever since. And we've set up quite a, gorgeous life there.
Beautiful. Yeah, you need that end date, don't you? Like a goal that you're working towards. Otherwise it feels a little bit like it's never going to end.
No. And I mean, I think there are lots of amazing lessons to learn from it. I think we are much better communicators as a result. You can work through conflict in such a better way when there's nothing but communication to solve it. You have to just sit there and talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
And I think I learnt a lot through that and I think we're both better off, but I would prefer not to ever do it again.
Oh, absolutely. It's nice to just have the presence right there.
Exactly.
When did you know that he was the one?
Genuinely the first day I met him.
Wow.
And that is so not me at all. But I spent the day with him and then I saw my brother the next day and Zach was like, what's up with you? And I was like, oh, nothing. He's like, no, you seem happy, like much happier.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh goodness, like he's already affected me that much that like people around me could start to sense that I was so much lighter and so much more joyful with him around me. And I just in that moment realized like if I can spend my life with someone who has that effect on me, like that is just like what a privilege. I think he would agree. The moment we met each other after this 4 months of like weird shy banter that was also deeply flirty, we were like, oh, okay, well, I guess we better meet now.
Yeah.
And it went off. I mean, it did. Shouldn't say it went off without a hitch. We had the awkward, like, do we hug, do we kiss the first time?
I know.
We were in a car, leant over. It was so awkward. But thankfully, that was the only awkward moment.
But you knew that this guy needs to be in my life in some sort of capacity.
Yeah. And on paper, it doesn't make sense with him and I, like completely different interests, completely different ways of seeing the world. Yeah. But when anyone is around us, it makes sense. And he's just, he's my person.
Oh, I love that so much. What do you love the most about your relationship together?
I think I just love how easy it is.
Yeah.
So much of life isn't easy.
Yeah.
And with him, everything feels easier. It feels lighter. He brings me just the most unadulterated joy. Yeah. He's silly, he's funny, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And I think that, some of those formative experiences in my life might have made me a bit more serious and a bit more hardened, and he just completely cracks that and just, lets the light shine through. And I think, I'm excited for the life that we can build that has a bit of both, per the, meeting in the middle and not being reckless in either direction. Yeah. I think that all of those things can come together and we can create a home and a life that we're really proud of, that brings the best of both of us. But he is truly just the best.
Why do you think it's important to capture memories like he had done and you both do now in your digital Instagram account? Why do you think it's important to have that there?
I think that life moves at a terrifyingly rapid pace. Yeah. And, I've experienced this even with building a business, that so rarely do you stop and just look around. Yeah. You take in the sights, take in what you've done, what you've achieved. And so I think that the fact that we can do that very often with capturing memories, just means that there is this road bump that makes you stop and look around and makes you reflect on all the things that have happened. And I think that's really important to having a balanced and a healthy outlook on life, that if you are in a hard time or you're in an amazing time, it's good to know that there will be ups and downs around it, and it won't be in isolation, this huge volcano. So I just think it balances everything, and it really just draws you to that kind of bird's eye to say, look, this is your life. This is what you've done. Be proud of it.
Absolutely. It's so hard to stop sometimes and take it all in. You said that Ollie's really silly and he's a funny guy, and he cracks you, you know, which is so awesome. I think I need that sometimes too when I'm being too serious, because we just have to shake out of it at times.
Agreed. And sometimes you need someone to do that for you.
Yes, you do. Yeah. I can be so stuck in my own way.
Me too.
How else has he supported you with the loss and grief you've encountered?
So it's like he never met my dad. And so I think that he can sometimes find it challenging to know how to support me when, you know, he came in after the fact. He came in at a time where I was doing okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes when he sees me not okay, it's about for him as well also learning.
Of course.
You know, and speaking and learning more about my dad. And he's such a good listener. And I think that he's also deeply, deeply thoughtful. So a small anecdote, I ended up driving my dad's car after he passed. I don't know, it was there and I ended up driving it.
Yeah.
And I drove it for like 10 years and it was such a shitbox. Like it really should not have stood the test of time.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there was like something meaningful about it. And in the end, the license plate, so it was a personalized license plate for my dad that he had. And when the time came that we were like, all right, this is genuinely not safe for the road, we ended up selling the car. And Ollie got the license plate printed as a print for all of my brothers and framed so that we could have that thing that had meant so, you know, it was such a small thing.
That is
but it was
so
something,
beautiful.
you know, and it was so thoughtful. And it was just, I would have never have given it a second thought. But the fact that he had marked that passage of time with just something small, it wasn't over the top. It was, hey guys, I know that that's, you know, the closing of one chapter. Here's a way to commemorate it. And so all four of us have that sitting in our respective homes. I've got a brother that lives in New York. You know, we've all got this that ties us together that Ollie created for us. And I just think that's who he is. And that's how he navigates grief, by being really thoughtful and by just doing what he can to support us all. And not just me, my family as well.
Oh, he must just get along with your brothers like a house on fire.
I mean,
I can picture it now.
He grew up with just sisters, so I grew up with just brothers, and he's like, oh my God, men
boys,
let me fight.
Oh, and if you could introduce your dad to Ollie, what do you think he would say?
He would adore him. I mean, the one thing that I think really ties all of us together is music.
Yeah.
Like Ollie loves music. I adore music. Dad loved music. Yeah. And I think that they would just bond straight away through music. That's how Ollie and I early in our, you know, we would just send each other songs.
Yes.
And that's kind of the most intimate thing you can do because it's your personal taste. So I think that they would have loved and bonded over music, and that would have been the gateway to them having, you know, the most flourishing relationship. And I think for my dad to have seen someone who respects me and who supports me in my career as well in the way that Ollie does, I think that he'd just be so stoked.
We do end on one final question, Zara. We've been talking about the most special things you've inherited in your life so far. What is something that you intend on passing on, and who are you passing it on to?
So I've thought long and hard about this, and I said before, I don't necessarily assign a whole lot of value to things.
Yeah.
I think that I find much more value in conversations and ideas. So my dad's name was Ray and my niece's name is Ray. And so I think what I would pass down is all of the wonderful, you know, core parts of Dad I want to pass down to my niece Ray, who will never know her grandpa, but will in her name and in her values carry so much of him. And I look forward to playing a really small part of facilitating that as she grows up, being able to teach her about him and what he stood for and how he saw the world. And hopefully she will grow into someone that is led by the beautiful mission that he was dictated by. And I hope that she knows that her namesake was a brilliant man who she'll never meet but will be with all of us. And so, yeah, Ray to Ray is what I want to pass down.
That's so beautiful. Zara, thank you so much for coming on Inherited.
Thank you for having me.
No,
great fun.
It's been such a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Inherited. To support Zara, follow the Daily Aus on socials or subscribe to their newsletter. They also have a podcast too. And if you enjoyed this episode, click follow on your favourite podcast app. We're on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube at Inherited the Pod. And we'll be back with another episode next Tuesday. I'll see you then.